Hi, my name is Emily, and this is my AMLE Publications summary. I chose the Middle School Journal May 2013 issue, Active Purposeful Learning Experiences for All Students, and the Middle Ground issue from February 2011 that dealt with differentiation. These were really important to me because I'm a STEM teacher, so of course I wanted to have active, meaningful learning experiences. And sometimes I feel that although we have the projects, they may not necessarily convey the meaning that I want them to. As for the differentiation, I'm a new teacher. I struggle with this, but I don't want to leave any of my kids behind. So I definitely enjoyed the articles on both of these subjects. First off, there's similarities and differences. Just for the aesthetics, the design was much more inviting in the Middle Ground edition. The colors and the imagery in the articles kind of drew you in. In contrast, the Middle School Journal was more straightforward and serious, and unfortunately, it was a little less interesting to me. And I really think that that had something to do with design because as teachers, we know that presentation matters. They did have a similar mix of authors in both publications. It was a lot of educators. There were administrators. I did see some outside professionals in there. For instance, a cyberbullying article in the Middle Ground edition was written by a cyber expert in the field. So that was interesting to me. Both also seemed to be intended for middle grades educators and were positive and uplifting. The intended audiences. Who should read these? I would say that again, would be professionals, educators, administrators, researchers, people who really care about the middle grades. As for if it's appropriate for all ages, if I was a teenager, I would not enjoy this. Otherwise, I think that for adults, the Middle Ground and Middle School Journal both seemed appropriate. The Middle Ground seemed more appropriate for teachers and people who are actually in the trenches, whereas the Middle School Journal seemed more for scholarly study and for researchers and administrators. Authors, contributors, their credibility from my perspective, there were educators in there. They were part of most of the articles. There were also administrators and researchers. They usually added a voice in with the educators. And then again, that outside professional that I mentioned added even more perspective from outside of education. The educators, administrators, and researchers were all credible to me because of their background, either in experience teaching or they would cite research in the article or that they had done that you backed up what they were claiming. As for the professionals, they were credible because what they were writing about was based on their chosen profession. So, also, I enjoyed the fact that they brought someone else outside of the field of education in because it made us seem like we're part of the real world. The educators are we're just not in school. We are not just in a bubble. A key to differentiating instruction is having a multitude of strategies to use with students on different learning paths. The strategy that works brilliantly with a few students might self-destruct with another group. This was a quote from Todd Williamson from my practice-based article, and it spoke to me very much. I teach a very hands-on class. It's called Project Lead the Way, and my students, some of them choose to take my class, and some of them are plunked in my class. The ones that choose my class are inclined to do the hands-on things or maybe inclined to think critically, but the ones that are placed in here for the most part are not interested in those things. So I have to find ways to differentiate and meet their needs, as well as the needs of special education students and my high flyers. So those are thinking of all of those things and trying to meet all those needs. It's challenging for me and not something I've ever had to do. So I really enjoyed reading the articles on differentiation, and specifically I enjoyed reading Differentiate Teaching and Learning with Web 2.0 Tools from Middle Ground. It was written by Kimberly Lytle, I want to say, and it had opinions from various teachers who were experienced. And I liked that. Again, I think that their experience and the fact that they're in the trenches really made this a credible article. So I enjoyed that part. So for a brief overview of the article, it had input from several different experienced educators. One of the gentlemen was a 10-year veteran of education in, I believe, math and science. And another one was a national board certified teacher here in North Carolina. So there's just some real good voices that are bringing this article to us. They talk about Web 2.0 tools. Who's heard of that before? I had not, even though I use some of these tools on a daily basis, not the ones mentioned in this article. But Web 2.0 tools, I learned, are tools used for collaboration. They're revolutionary new tools that are just expanding the ways that we can meet our children's needs. So I really liked the article because it gave some resources and then it explained ways to use them, actual ways that are real and practical. One of the resources was called voicethread.com, and it encourages conversations around images. So it's kind of like a gallery walk, if anyone's heard of those, where they put the pictures on the walls and then they have people go around and you write stuff on them. Well, it's the same thing except it's online. So students can kind of have anonymity with it. It offers a chance for people to speak up who may not be heard. And again, it meets kids' needs in a technological way, which is something that they enjoy and that they're going to be more open to. So Animoto.com was another one mentioned in there that gives students a quick and easy way to make slideshows with music. So Animoto is a good one for visual learners, and it gives them that feeling that they're doing something a little more than a worksheet. It's something that it may not be for everyone, but maybe the person that didn't want to do a poster because they weren't good at drawing could use Animoto. So they gave some really good tools. Glogster, as I read the article and got into that, it's interactive online posters. It is amazing. Kids can do podcasts with that. So if they're more of an auditory listener, they can do what I'm doing right now and record themselves, and then they can add that into their blog on Glogster and have that as part of their learning. So that was really neat. And then Audacity.com, I believe, is audio notes. One of the teachers in the article was saying that he takes audio notes as he lectures and breaks them up into chapters for people who can't keep up with notes. I don't know about you guys, but I have a lot of students who cannot keep up with writing notes, and I end up spending much more time if I'm doing direct instruction than I had planned to if I asked them to take notes. So this would be amazing. This would give everyone, no matter their level of speed and ability to keep up, and especially if they learn better through auditory instruction, hearing those notes is going to be better for them. So I really appreciated that, and I really thought that was a great tool. So for my research-based article, I chose Too Close for Brain Comfort, Improving Science Vocabulary Learning in the Middle Grades. It was from the Middle School Journal. I thoroughly enjoyed this article. It talked about the way that children learn science vocabulary, and it was more from a cognitive perspective, which I have learned in these classes that I'm taking really fascinates me to think about the way people think. And the end premise of the article was that as we move towards student-centered learning, we can't only think about like the classroom environment. We have to think about what's going on inside their mind, their mental environment. So that was just really interesting to me. So the article covers the two ways that children learn words. They learn them through phonemes. I can't say that word very well, which of course is the way that a word sounds. So I already knew that one. And then the other way that children learned that children learn words is through morphemes, which is through the meaning of a word, so basically referring to prefixes and suffixes. They talked about the thought that teaching meaning of prefixes and suffixes will help students be better able to identify and discern new words. And I definitely thought that that was relevant, because if they know that the prefix terra means earth, then they're going to know that they might be able to figure out that extraterrestrial means not from earth, because they know that terra, something like that. So I get that. I thought that was really good. But then they talked about the generation effect. That hit me really good, because it was about thinking in class. Can we even? It's like pulling teeth to get children to think in my class. So the generation effect, though, it talks about asking students to come up with their own idea. Instead of using a website, instead of using a textbook, you pose a question and you say you must come up with it out of your own mind. And so you may give them a word and have them come up with the meaning out of their own mind, just looking at the way the word is made. And eventually, the idea is that if you've laid the groundwork through this process of creating their own answer, their own meaning to that word that's intrinsic, the students are going to gain a substantial memory advantage over traditional delivery methods of, here it is, now write it down. So I really liked that. My class is about critical thinking, so I would love for the generation effect to take effect in my class. Another thing that they talked about was the production effect, which is basically when students are working, a lot of times on independent work, you expect them to be silent, but the production effect says that if students say the word as they learn it, they speak that meaning into existence. They're speaking it out loud, and it's soaking in deeply. So I really enjoyed this article. As for how it might apply to me in the future, I would like to consider brain science in the future for my for grad school classes. If I continue on, I would definitely see it being like a research paper that I may write on. I enjoy the cognitive side of learning and just understanding how everything clicks together. So for my own article, I would do an article titled Reach Your Students Where They Are, Out with Old Style and In with New. I don't necessarily think everything old is not great, but I have found in my practice this last year and a half that there's a lot of reluctance of stand and deliver teachers to change their habits. And I think this really harms students, because students don't learn how we learned 5 years ago even. So I think that we need to embrace the style of the learners in our class today. And I think that we need to look at technologies and tools that are available to us to really make our learning student-centered. So that would be what my article would be about. It'd be published in Middle Grounds, because it would be more dynamic and practice-based than in Middle School Journal. Thank you so much for listening, and I would love to hear any questions or feedback. Thank you.